September of 51, I was locking up the sawmill when I found her. 16 years old, hands sliced to ribbons, dress torn like she'd crawled through hell itself. She couldn't scream, couldn't hear me neither when I told her to stay put, just stared at me with eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. I didn't know her daddy owned half the county, didn't know she'd run from a marriage contract signed before she could walk, didn't know that helping her would cost me everything I had left. My job, my freedom, damn near my life. All I knew was the blood. And the way she flinched when I reached for her, like she'd been taught that every hand was a fist. By dawn 3 days later, they'd be coming with torches and rope. One of us would hang, maybe both. But that night, I just wrapped her hands and prayed I wasn't making the biggest mistake of my life. The sawmill after hours smelled like pine resin and sweat. I was sweeping up the last of the day's dust when I noticed the main gate swinging open. Foreman'd been drinking again, left it unlocked when he stumbled out at quittin' time. I set the broom against the wall and walked over to lock it proper. That's when I saw the blood, fresh drops on the concrete, dark and wet in the evening light. Trail led straight toward the lumber stacks at the back of the yard. Now, I'd worked at Ashford Timber 6 years, kept my head down, did my job, didn't ask questions. After my wife died, that's all I had, the work, the routine, the silence. But blood meant trouble, and trouble in Dutch Ashford's mill meant you either called the law or you walked away. I should have walked away. Didn't. I followed the trail between the stacks, boots crunching on sawdust and wood chips. The September heat had finally broke, but the air still hung heavy. Cicadas screamed in the trees beyond the fence. Behind the last pallet, curled up like a kicked dog, I found her. Girl couldn't have been more than 16. White cotton dress, expensive fabric, the kind a mill worker's daughter don't wear, torn nearly to rags. Her hands were wrapped in strips of her own petticoat, blood seeping through. When she heard my boots, she scrambled backward, eyes wide, mouth open but no sound coming out. I raised both hands slow. "Easy now. I ain't gonna hurt you." She stared at my mouth, didn't respond, just kept watching my lips. That's when I understood. The girl was deaf. I could see it now in the way her eyes tracked every movement, the way her body stayed coiled tight, reading the world through sight alone. Fresh bruise on her left cheek, shaped like knuckles. Dirt under her fingernails. Around her neck hung a delicate gold locket, chain broken on one side. This girl had been running hard. I knelt down slow, keeping my hands where she could see 'em, pointed at myself. "Oz," I said, enunciating clear, then pointed at her, made a question with my face. She hesitated. Then her fingers moved, quick, graceful, sign language I didn't understand. I shook my head, showed her my empty palms. She understood. Reached out careful and traced letters in the sawdust. C-L-E-M. "Clem," I said aloud, and she nodded. I pointed toward the office, then made a phone gesture with my hand. Her reaction was immediate. Violent headshake, panic flashing across her face. She grabbed my wrist, surprisingly strong, and shook her head again. No, no police. Which meant whatever she was running from wore a badge or paid someone who did. I looked at her hands again. The cuts were deep. Barbed wire. Had to be. The kind of desperate that makes you climb a fence knowing it'll tear you open because what's behind you is worse. My wife's voice in my head, clear as the day she died. "Don't let this place make you hard, Oswin. Keep your heart soft." I stood up. The girl watched me, every muscle ready to bolt. I pointed at my truck in the parking lot, then at her, then made a walking motion with my fingers. She stared at me for a long moment, measuring, deciding if I was another kind of danger or maybe, just maybe, a way out. Finally, she nodded. She could barely stand. I offered my arm and she took it, leaning heavy. We made it halfway across the yard when I heard the trucks, 3 of them, roaring up the access road, headlights cutting through the dusk. I recognized the lead vehicle, Dutch Ashford's black Dodge, the one with the custom chrome grille that cost more than I made in a year. The truck skidded to a stop at the gate. Doors opened. 4 men climbed out, Dutch's foreman Bud Carlisle and 3 boys I didn't recognize. Hard-looking fellas, the kind you hire when you need muscle, not timber cut. Bud spotted us immediately. His face went from surprise to something like relief, then settled on grim determination. Oz Mercer, he called out, voice carrying across the yard. Step away from the girl. She belongs to Mr. Ashford. Beside me, Clem made a sound, small, broken, terrified. Not quite a whimper, but close. Her fingers dug into my arm. I looked at Bud, at the three men fanning out behind him, at Clem, shaken beside me. Then I did the dumbest thing I'd done in 6 years. I stepped in front of her. She ain't going nowhere, I said. Bud Carlyle stood 20 feet from my porch, lantern in one hand, jaw set tight. The three men behind him had spread out, not threatening exactly, but positioned, like dogs waiting on a command. Oz, don't be a fool, Bud said. His voice carried that tone a man uses when he's trying to sound reasonable, but ain't feeling it. Girl's Mr. Ashford's daughter. She run off. He wants her back. That's the end of it. Don't look like the end to me, I said. Looks like the beginning of something ugly. One of the younger men, cocky kid with a scar through his eyebrow, stepped forward. Old man, you got no idea what you're mixed up in. Then enlighten me. Bud shot the kid a look that said, shut up. Then back to me. Oz, you been a good worker. Reliable. Mr. Ashford respects that. Hand over Clementine. We forget this happened. Hell, there might even be a bonus in it for you come Friday. Don't want a bonus? What do you want? I glanced back at the cabin door. Clem was pressing against it from inside. I could feel her weight through the wood. Terrified, but listening. Want to know why a 16-year-old girl climbs through barbed wire to get away from her own daddy? Bud's face hardened. That ain't your concern. Blood on my floor says otherwise. The scarred kid moved his hand toward his belt. I caught the movement, saw the pistol grip. Bud noticed too, waved him back. We ain't here for trouble, Oz. But we will have that girl, one way or another. Then I reckon you better bring more men. Silence stretched out. Crickets sang. Somewhere distant, a dog barked. Finally, Bud sighed, almost sad-like. You got till dawn. Mr. Ashford himself is coming then. You can explain to him why you're keeping his property. She ain't property. Law says she is, 16 and unmarried. She's whatever her daddy says she is. They left. Truck engines growled back down the dirt road, red taillights disappearing into the pines. I went back inside. Clem was sitting at my kitchen table, hands clasped tight, still shaken. The cabin looked smaller with another person in it. 6 years I'd lived here alone, just me and the quiet and my wife's memory hanging in the air like pipe smoke. I pulled out the notepad I kept for grocery lists. Wrote, "You hungry?" She nodded. I made what I had, eggs scrambled with a little onion, biscuits left over from breakfast, coffee strong enough to strip paint. She ate like she hadn't in days, used her left hand mostly, the right one was too torn up. While she ate, I heated water on the stove, found the first aid kit I kept under the sink. When the water was warm, I sat across from her and held out my hand, palm up. She understood, set her damaged hand in mine, gentle-like. The cuts were worse up close. Deep gouges from razor wire, still weepin'. Some had dirt packed in. Gonna scar bad no matter what I did, but I could at least clean 'em proper. I worked slow. She flinched once but didn't pull away. Watched my face the whole time, reading every expression. I tried to keep my face soft. My wife used to say I looked mean when I concentrated, all furrow and jaw clench. Had to remember this girl was measuring every movement for danger. When I finished wrapping her hands in clean cotton strips, I wrote, "Better?" She nodded, then took the pencil, wrote in careful cursive, "Why help me?" I stared at those words. Couldn't rightly answer, because it was right, because I'd failed to protect my wife from the cancer, and maybe this was some kind of redemption, because 6 years of being alone had made me hungry for a reason to matter again. I wrote, "Because you needed it." She studied my face, then wrote, "They'll come back." I know. They'll hurt you. Probably. Her eyes filled up. She wrote, handshaken, "I'm sorry." I took the pencil. "Don't be. You didn't do nothing wrong." She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist, careful of the bandages. For the first time, I saw something besides fear in her face. Maybe gratitude, maybe hope. Hard to say. I showed her the back room. Used to be a storage space, but it had a cot and a blanket. She could sleep there. I'd take the chair by the stove, keep watch. She wrote, "You should sleep. Will later." She nodded, too tired to argue. Disappeared into the back room. I sat in my chair, rifle across my lap, and listened to the night sounds. Somewhere up on the ridge, I heard an engine idling, saw a flicker of light through the trees. They weren't waiting till dawn. They were watching, making sure I didn't run. Come first light, Dutch Ashford would arrive, and then we'd see just how much my word was worth against a man who owned half the county. I checked the rifle. 5 rounds. Gonna need more than that. Dawn came gray and cold. I hadn't slept, just sat in that chair, watching the window, listening to the pines creak in the wind. Clem emerged from the back room around 6, moving quiet. She'd slept in her torn dress, didn't have nothing else. Her hair was tangled, face still smudged with yesterday's dirt, but her eyes were clearer, alert. She saw me with the rifle and her face went tight. Wrote on the notepad, "How many?" I'd been counting the lights on the ridge all night. 20, maybe more. She closed her eyes. Wrote, "I'll go. Stop this." "No. Please." I set the rifle down, knelt in front of her so she could read my lips clear. "Girl, I got nothing in this world worth keeping except my word. I said I'd protect you. That's what I'm doing." Her chin trembled, but she didn't cry. Tough kid. Had to be, to survive what she'd survived. The first truck arrived at 7, then another, then 5 more. By 8 o'clock, there were vehicles ringed around my property like wagons circling against Indians. Men stood in clusters, smoking, talking low. Some I recognized from the mill. Others were strangers, the kind of hard-faced boys Dutch hired when he needed persuading done. At 8:30, the black Cadillac pulled up. Dutch Ashford stepped out like a king arriving at court. Tall man, silver hair slicked back, wearing a suit that cost more than my truck. He surveyed the cabin, the men, the situation. Then he walked straight to my porch like he owned it, which in a way he did. Owned the mill, owned most of the town, owned the sheriff and half the county commissioners. He didn't knock, just called out, "Mercer, let's talk like civilized men." I opened the door a crack, kept the rifle visible. "Nothing civilized about what you did to that girl," I said. Dutch's smile didn't touch his eyes. "That girl is my daughter. She's disturbed, hysterical, doesn't know what's good for her. She knows enough to run from you. She's deaf, Mercer, simple-minded, can't make proper decisions." Rage flashed hot in my chest. Being deaf don't make her simple. The law sees it different. She's my ward, my property under the law, and you're harboring stolen property. She ain't property. Dutch's expression shifted. Businessman to snake. "I'm a reasonable man, Mercer. You've worked for me 6 years. Steady worker. I respect that. So here's my offer. Hand over Clementine. I'll give you a week's bonus. We forget this ever happened." "You keep your job." "And if I don't?" "Then tomorrow you're unemployed. Blacklisted from every mill in East Texas. And Sheriff Barnes arrests you for kidnapping." She came to me. Not how the paperwork reads. Behind me, I felt Clem's presence. She was standing in the doorway to the back room, watching, even though she couldn't hear. She saw Dutch, and her whole body went rigid. I looked back at her. Her lips formed words, "I'm sorry." Something in my chest hardened, not my heart, my spine. I turned back to Dutch. "She ain't property, not while I'm breathing." The smile vanished from Dutch's face. "Then you won't be breathing long, old man." He turned, walked back to the Cadillac, called out loud enough for everyone to hear, "Boys, Mr. Mercer needs time to reconsider his foolishness. We'll wait. He's got till noon. After that, we're coming in." The morning stretched out like taffy, hot despite the season, no breeze. The men outside built small fires, played cards, passed a bottle. It was a siege, a show of force. Dutch wanted me to watch, to understand just how outnumbered I was. Inside, Clem and I sat at the kitchen table. I tried to think of a plan but kept coming up empty. 20 men, 1 rifle, no phone to call for help. And even if I had one, who'd I call? Sheriff was Dutch's brother-in-law. Clem wrote, There's a back door. Woods. You could run. Won't run. Why? I thought about my wife. About the promise I made her. About 6 years of just existin', not livin'. About how this girl's fear had woken something in me I thought had died. I wrote, because runnin' means they win. Means every other girl in this county knows nobody's comin' to help. She stared at the paper, then at me. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Silent, like everything else about her. She reached across the table and took my hand, squeezed it. Her bandaged fingers were warm. For a moment, in that cabin surrounded by 20 men and certain ruin, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Then the knock came, different from Dutch's poundin', softer. I cracked the door. Mary Gunderson, the mill's bookkeeper, gray-haired widow, kind eyes, holding a covered basket. Oz, I know you probably won't trust this, but I brought cornbread. Figured you might need it. Mary, you shouldn't be here. Probably not. She lowered her voice. My husband was deaf. From the war. People treated him like he was stupid too. He wasn't. She pushed the basket through the crack. There's something else in there. Under the cornbread. I looked. A pistol. 6 rounds. It was Henry's. He'd want it used for something right. Before I could respond, another vehicle pulled up. Sheriff's cruiser. Lon Barnes stepped out, hand resting on his gun, badge catching the morning sun. Oswin Mercer, he called out. By the authority vested in me, you're under arrest for kidnapping. Come out with your hands up or we're coming in. Behind him, Dutch Ashford smiled. Sheriff Lon Barnes stood in my yard with his hand on his pistol. Behind him, Dutch Ashford waited like a man watching a play he'd already written the ending to. I kept the door cracked, rifle barrel visible but not pointed. Yet, Lon, you know this ain't right, I said. What I know is the law, Oz. Girl's a minor. Her father wants her back. You got no legal right to keep her. Legal and right ain't always the same thing. Maybe not, but I enforce legal, not right. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable but committed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Come out peaceful. Maybe the judge goes easy on you. I glanced back at Clem. She was pressed against the kitchen wall, eyes wide, hands clutched to her chest. She'd seen this before, men with badges doing Dutch's biddin'. Probably seen it the night her mama fell down those stairs. Give me a minute, I said to Lon. You got 30 seconds. I closed the door, turned to Clem. Her face was a question mark. What now? I didn't have an answer. Just a gut feeling that if I let them take her, she'd disappear. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But girls like Clem, the ones nobody believes, the ones the law don't protect, they disappear all the time. And nobody asks questions. Then I heard it. A voice cutting through the tension outside. Hold on now, Sheriff. I cracked the door again. Pastor Wendell was walking through the crowd. Old man, bent with arthritis, white hair wild around his head. But his voice carried weight. Before you arrest this man, there's something folks should know. Dutch stepped forward. This is none of your concern, preacher. Reckon it is. I was at the Ashford house last night. Came to discuss the wedding ceremony for Clementine and Eller Hutchins. He paused, letting that sink in. Heard you and Hutchins negotiating terms. Hutchins is paying $500 plus debt forgiveness. You called it a dowry, but it sounded a whole lot like buying cattle. The crowd stirred. Even in 1951, even in East Texas, selling your daughter sat wrong with most folks. Dutch's face went purple. You're a liar. Am I? Eller's standing right over there. Ask him. Everyone turned. Eller Hutchins, 50 years old, soft belly, weak chin, tried to fade into the crowd. Failed. That true, Eller? Someone called out. You paying for Dutch's girl? Eller's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Pastor Wendell continued. And I saw Dutch strike Clementine when she refused to sign the marriage papers. That's why she ran. Girl's got a bruise on her face shaped like his knuckles. The atmosphere shifted. Some of the men looked uncomfortable now. A few started edging toward their trucks. Mary Gunderson stepped forward from wherever she'd been waiting. I saw her hands, barbed wire cuts. She climbed that fence desperate. Another voice, Tom Bradley from the lumberyard. My daughter's 16. I don't care what the law says about property. That ain't right. Dutch sensed control slipping. Sheriff, arrest all of them for obstruction. But Lon hesitated. He was corrupt, sure, but he wasn't stupid. Arresting a preacher and half the mill workers would bring questions. State police. Maybe even federal attention. In that moment of confusion, Clem appeared beside me. She pointed frantically toward the back of the cabin. The woods, I understood. While everyone was focused on the argument, we could slip out, maybe make it to the tree line before anyone noticed. It was a slim chance. But slim was better than none. I nodded. Mary saw us moving, dropped her basket, accidentally, causing a commotion as cornbread scattered across the ground. We went out the back door, moving fast but quiet. The woods were 30 yards away. 20, 10. Behind us, someone shouted, "They're running!" We hit the tree line as the first gunshot cracked, warning shot, high and wide. Branches whipped our faces, pine needles slick underfoot. Clem was fast, kept pace despite her torn hands. We ran for what felt like hours but was probably 10 minutes. Finally stopped in a thick stand of pine, both of us gaskin' hearts hammering. In the distance, dogs. Dutch had hounds. Clem's face was streaked with sweat and pine sap. She pulled out the notepad. Amazingly, she'd grabbed it. Wrote with shaken hands. Where? I knew one place Dutch couldn't touch, one piece of land his money and badges didn't control. The Caddo Reservation, 5 miles north. Federal land. But between here and there, 5 miles of woods, hunting dogs, and armed men who'd been promised a bonus for bringing us back. I wrote, Indian land. They can't follow. She nodded, too scared to question. Behind us, the first howl split the air. Long, mournful, getting closer. Can you run? I wrote. She nodded again. We ran. The dogs' voices grew louder, closer, a chorus of hunger and pursuit. Through the pines, I caught glimpses of movement, men fanning out, driving us like deer toward shooters. My lungs burned. Clem was flagging, stumbled over a root. I caught her, kept her moving. Then I saw it through the trees. A break in the forest, open ground, and standing at the edge, silhouetted against the morning sun, a figure, waiting. The figure at the edge of the clearing was Thomas Whitehorse. I recognized him even from a distance, gray braided hair, weathered face, standing still as a fence post. We stumbled out of the tree line, both of us heaving for breath. The dogs were maybe 2 minutes behind, their howls bouncing through the pines like echoes in a canyon. Thomas didn't move, just watched us approach with dark eyes that had seen plenty of white folks running from something. Heard the dogs, he said when we got close. Figured someone was in trouble. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. Need sanctuary. Thomas looked at Clem, took in her torn dress, bandaged hands, terrified face, then back at me. Who's chasing? Dutch Ashford. His jaw tightened. That man tried to buy our timber rights back in '47, offered pennies on the dollar. When we refused, he threatened to bring federal pressure, get us removed. He spat. He ain't welcome on Caddo land. Will you let us cross? Behind us, the dogs were getting closer. I could hear men's voices now, calling to each other through the trees. Thomas studied me for a long moment. Then, follow me. Quick. We crossed into Caddo territory, marked by a rusted fence and a weathered sign. On the other side, a small community. Maybe 30 houses, a church, a general store built from rough timber. Thomas led us to the tribal council house, a low building with a tin roof. Inside, 6 elders sat around a wooden table, 3 men, 3 women. They looked up as we entered, faces unreadable. Thomas spoke to them in Caddo, quick and low, then switched to English. This is Oz Mercer, good man, helped my family during the hard winter of '49. The girls running from Dutch Ashford. The eldest woman, Ruth Longfeather, gray hair and a long braid, gestured for Clem to come closer. Clem hesitated, then stepped forward. Ruth studied her face, gently took one of Clem's bandaged hands, turned it over, saw the cuts. Her expression hardened. You can't speak? Ruth asked. Clem shook her head, pointed to her ears. Deaf, I said, but she can read lips. And write. Ruth handed Clem a piece of paper and a pencil. Wrote something herself first, showed it to Clem. Why did you run? Clem's hand shook as she wrote, My father sold me to pay his debts. The elders exchanged looks. Ruth translated to Cato for those who needed it. Faces grew grim. One of the younger men on the council spoke. We can't harbor fugitives. Federal government would come down on us. She ain't a fugitive, I said. She's a girl running from a beating. Law don't see it that way, the man replied. She's 16, property of her father under Texas law. My stomach dropped. We'd run 5 miles through rough country for nothing. Then Thomas spoke up. There's another law, older than Texas. Everyone looked at him. Pre-statehood treaty. If a Caddo person claims protection over someone, formal adoption, that person falls under tribal jurisdiction until a federal court rules otherwise. Process takes months. Ruth nodded slowly. The Adoption Protection Clause. Haven't used it since the 30s, but it's still valid. Hope flickered in my chest. Would you do that? Adopt her? Ruth looked at Clem. Child, do you understand what this means? You'd become Caddo, legally. Our laws would govern you, not Texas law. Your father couldn't touch you without federal approval. Clem wrote frantically, Yes, please. It's not just papers, Ruth continued. Adoption means family, means responsibility. You'd represent us, our ways, our dignity. Clem nodded, tears streaming down her face. Ruth looked at the other elders. They conferred quietly in Caddo. Finally, Ruth spoke. We agree, but there are conditions. You'll live here, learn our ways, work for your keep, and you'll attend the mission school, learn to read and write better, learn a trade. Clem wrote, I'll do anything, thank you. For the first time since I found her in the sawmill, Clem's face showed something besides fear. Relief. Maybe even hope. Ruth turned to me. And you, Oz Mercer? What's your stake in this? I thought about my wife. About 6 years of being half alive. About how this girl's courage had reminded me what it meant to stand for something. Just trying to do right, I said. That's rare these days. Ruth almost smiled. You may visit, but the girl stays with us. Outside, we heard vehicles approaching. Lots of them. Thomas looked out the window. They're at the boundary, Dutch and the sheriff, maybe 20 men. We stepped outside. Sure enough, Dutch's Cadillac was parked at the fence line. Lon Barnes stood beside it, and with them, a new face. Man in a gray suit, carrying a briefcase, clean cut, official looking. Thomas muttered a curse. That's Carl Winters, federal prosecutor from Tyler. Dutch must have called in every favor he had. Winters stepped forward, close to the fence but not crossing. His voice carried cold authority. I have an emergency injunction from federal district court. Clementine Ashford is a minor and must be returned to her legal guardian immediately. Tribal adoption laws do not supersede federal custody statutes regarding minors. You have 1 hour to comply, or everyone here, including you, Mr. Whitehorse, will face federal charges for harboring a fugitive and obstruction of justice. The elders shifted uncomfortably. They couldn't fight the federal government. Nobody could. Dutch stood behind Winters, arms crossed, smiling like he'd already won. Then Clem did something I didn't expect. She walked forward, pulled out her notepad, wrote something, and handed it to Ruth. Ruth read it. Her eyes widened. She looked at Clem. Are you certain, child? Clem nodded. Ruth turned to Winters. The girl requests to testify, under oath, about what happened in the Ashford household. Will you hear her? Dutch's smile vanished. His face went pale as creek water. Winters hesitated. Then, federal law requires I hear testimony from all involved parties before enforcing custody. Very well, we'll convene a hearing. 1 hour. As the prosecutor walked back to his car, I caught Dutch's expression. Raw panic. Barely masked. Whatever Clem was about to say, Dutch was terrified of it. They set up the hearing in the council house. Federal Prosecutor Winters at the head of the table, a court reporter he'd brought along tapping away at a stenograph machine. Sheriff Barnes stood by the door, hand never far from his pistol. Dutch sat across from us, two lawyers flanking him like guard dogs. The elders remained as witnesses. Pastor Wendell had somehow made it over, must have followed the commotion. Mary Gunderson, too, standing in the back with her arms crossed. Clem sat at the front, hands folded on the table. Ruth Longfeather beside her, ready to interpret. Winters cleared his throat. For the record, this is an emergency custody hearing regarding Clementine Ashford minor. Miss Ashford has requested to testify. He looked at Clem. You understand you'll be speaking under oath, that lying carries legal consequences? Clem nodded. She can't speak verbally, Ruth said. She'll write. I'll read aloud. Acceptable. Winters slid paper and pencil across the table. Miss Ashford, did you leave your father's home voluntarily? Clem wrote, hand steady despite everything. Yes. Why? Long pause. Then, he sold me. Dutch exploded out of his chair. That's a lie. She's disturbed, doesn't understand. Winters cut him off. Mr. Ashford, sit down or I'll have you removed. Dutch sat, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Winters turned back to Clem. Explain what you mean by sold. Clem wrote for a full minute. Ruth read aloud, voice steady. My father arranged my marriage to Eller Hutchins. Mr. Hutchins agreed to pay $500 and forgive my father's timber debts. The contract was written. I saw it. My father called it a dowry, but it had debt forgiveness clauses. Business terms, not marriage terms. Murmurs rippled through the room. Do you have proof of this contract? Winters asked. Clem shook her head. Dutch's lawyers leaned back, smiling. No proof meant no case. Then Mary Gunderson spoke up from the back. I have proof. Every head turned. Mary walked forward, pulled a folded paper from her handbag. I'm the bookkeeper at Ashford Timber. Have been for 12 years. Last night I made copies of certain documents. She handed them to Winters. That's the marriage contract between Dutch Ashford and Eller Hutchins. Page 2, paragraph 5. Debt forgiveness in exchange for marriage to Clementine Ashford. Winters read, eyebrows rising. He looked at Dutch. Mr. Ashford, is this your signature? Dutch's face went red, then white. That's a private business arrangement. This is a human trafficking document, Mr. Ashford. The room went dead silent. Winters continued. A marriage contract that includes financial compensation and debt relief is not a marriage. It's a sale, which violates federal anti-trafficking statutes. Dutch's lawyers started whispering frantically. Then Pastor Wendell stepped forward. I can corroborate. I was at the Ashford house 2 nights ago, preparing for the wedding ceremony. I heard Dutch and Eller negotiating. Hutchins said, 500 plus the timber rights, that's my final offer. Dutch said, the girl's worth more than that. They haggled like she was livestock. One of Dutch's lawyers stood. Your Honor, this is hearsay. This isn't a trial, Winters snapped. It's a custody hearing. I'll hear what I need to hear. He turned back to Clem. Continue your testimony. Why did you run that specific night? Clem's hand shook as she wrote. Ruth read, my father wanted me to sign the marriage license. I refused. He hit me. She paused, then wrote more. He said if I wouldn't obey, he'd make me useful another way. Said there were men who'd pay more than Hutchins for a girl who couldn't talk back. The room erupted. Even some of Dutch's own men looked disgusted. Winters held up a hand for silence, then asked the question I'd been wondering myself. Miss Ashford, you mentioned seeing a contract. Where? Clem wrote, in my father's desk, 3 days ago. That's when I knew I had to run. And the bruise on your face? How did that happen? My father hit me when I refused to sign. Winters looked at Dutch. Mr. Ashford, would you like to respond to these allegations? Dutch stood, face purple with rage. She's lying. She's deaf, simple-minded, doesn't understand what she saw. I'm not simple-minded, Clem wrote, hand pressing hard enough to nearly tear the paper. Ruth read it aloud with extra emphasis. Being deaf doesn't make me stupid. It just means I see things other people try to hide. Then she wrote something else, something that made Ruth's eyes go wide. Ruth looked at Clem. Child, are you certain you want this read aloud? Clem nodded, fierce. Ruth took a breath. My mother didn't fall down the stairs 8 years ago. I was there. I saw my father push her during an argument. She died in the hospital 3 days later. I tried to tell people, but I was 8 years old and deaf. Nobody believed me. The silence that followed was absolute. Dutch lunged across the table, face twisted with rage. You little... Sheriff Barnes grabbed him, slammed him back into his chair. Mr. Ashford, control yourself. Winters stood, face grave. Sheriff Barnes, place Mr. Ashford under arrest. Charges include assault of a minor, human trafficking, and suspected homicide. We'll be reopening the investigation into Helen Ashford's death. As the sheriff cuffed Dutch, the man's eyes locked on mine. Pure hatred. This is your fault, Mercer, he snarled. You're a dead man. They dragged him out, still screaming threats. I should have felt relief, victory even, but all I felt was a cold knot in my gut. Because men like Dutch Ashford don't go down quiet. And even behind bars, they got reach. Winters approached me as the room cleared. Mr. Mercer, you're still technically under arrest for custodial interference, but given the circumstances, he paused. I'm releasing you on your own recognizance. The charges will likely be dropped. What about Clem? Temporary custody with the Caddo Nation pending further investigation. She's safe here. I looked at Clem. She was hugging Ruth, finally letting herself cry. Safe. For now? But as we walked outside, I saw Tom Bradley waiting by the fence, the man who'd spoken up for Clem that first night. He looked sick, pale. Oz, he said, I need to talk to you. Private. We stepped away from the others. Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. Dutch made calls from the sheriff's office before they took him to county lockup. I was there dropping off my timesheet. Heard him talking to someone named Virgil. Said to finish what we started. Kill the old man. Make it look like an accident. My blood went cold. Who's Virgil? Don't know. But Oz. Dutch has got people. Mean people. This ain't over. That night, I stayed at the council house. Ruth insisted. Said it wasn't safe for me to go back to my cabin alone. She was probably right. Clem was settled in with a Caddo family. The Barefoots, who had 2 daughters close to her age. For the first time since I found her, she'd be sleeping somewhere that felt like a home instead of a hideout. I lay on a cot in the back room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the night sounds. Couldn't sleep. Tom Bradley's warning kept playing in my head. Kill the old man. Make it look like an accident. Dutch was in county lockup, but his reach extended far beyond iron bars. Around midnight, I heard it. Truck engine, distant but getting closer, then another, then a third. I sat up, reached for my boots. Thomas appeared in the doorway. Heard it too. They're coming to the boundary. We went outside. 3 trucks idled at the fence line, headlights off, dark shapes moving between them. Maybe 8 men, maybe more, hard to count in the shadows. One figure separated from the group, walked right up to the fence. Close enough I could see his face in the moonlight. Bud Carlisle, Dutch's foreman. Oz, he called out. Need to talk. Ain't got nothing to say to Dutch's men. Dutch is in jail. This ain't about him anymore. Thomas stepped beside me. You're at the boundary of Caddo land. You cross that fence, you're trespassing on federal territory. Ain't planning to cross. Bud's voice was tired, heavy. Just need Oz to know something. Against my better judgment, I walked closer, not crossing the fence, but close enough to talk without shouting. What? I asked. Bud looked back at the men behind him, then at me. Dutch paid us to come here tonight, paid us good, said to drag you off this land, make sure you never testified against him. My hand moved toward my belt. I'd borrowed Thomas's pistol. But we ain't doing it, Bud continued. Half these boys got daughters. What Dutch did to Clementine. He shook his head. That ain't right. We're working men, Oz, not killers. I studied his face, looking for the lie. Didn't see one. Why tell me this? Because Dutch has other men, meaner ones. Virgil Cade and his brother Roy. They ain't mill workers. They're the kind Dutch calls when he needs real violence done, and they're coming. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, but they're coming. Where? Don't know. But Virgil don't care about federal land or tribal law. He'll come onto this reservation if that's where you are. Tom Bradley stepped out of the shadows behind Bud. I'm sorry, Oz. I should have told you sooner. I was scared. Dutch threatened my family. I looked at these men, Tom, Bud, the others shuffling their feet in the darkness. They'd come here to warn me, risking Dutch's wrath even with him in jail. Why? I asked. Why help me now? Bud was quiet for a moment. Then, my daughter's 14. If some man tried to buy her, if I tried to sell her, he couldn't finish the sentence. What you did, standing up to Dutch, that took sand, more than any of us had. Figure that deserves better than being ambushed in the dark. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Dutch's lawyers are good. Real good. They'll have him out on bail in a day, maybe two. Soon as he's free, this gets worse. The trucks drove away, leaving us in darkness. The next morning, federal prosecutor Winters returned, brought a federal marshal with him. Mr. Mercer, we have a problem, Winters said. Judge Harlan set Dutch Ashford's bail at $50,000. He posted it an hour ago. He's free pending trial. My stomach dropped. How? He mortgaged everything. The mill, his house, timber rights. He's broke, but he's out. Ruth Longfeather came out of the council house. That man's dangerous. He threatened Oz in front of witnesses. I know, Winters said. That's why I've arranged for protective custody. Oz, you'll come with me to Tyler. Federal facility. You'll be safe there until trial. What about Clem? She stays here. The Caddo Nation has agreed to maintain custody. She's legally protected. I looked at Thomas, at Ruth, at the small community that had taken us in. Then back at Winters. No, I said. Excuse me? I ain't running to Tyler while Dutch is free to terrorize these folks. They stuck their necks out for me and Clem. I ain't leaving them exposed. Winters's jaw tightened. Mr. Mercer, this isn't a request. If you refuse protective custody, I can't guarantee your safety. Didn't ask you to. Ruth touched my arm. Oz, don't be foolish. You can't fight Dutch from a grave. Maybe not, but I can't live with myself if something happens to you folks and I was hiding in Tyler. Before anyone could argue further, a truck came screaming up the road. Pastor Wendell's truck, driving like the devil was chasing him. He jumped out, face pale. Dutch is out, and he's gathering men, 20, maybe 30. Word is he's coming here, tonight. The marshal reached for his radio. I'll call for backup. Won't get here in time, Thomas said. Nearest federal officers are in Dallas, 3 hours away. Winters looked at me. Then you need to leave, now. But I was looking at something else. At the people gathering around us. Caddo families coming out of their homes. Men, women, teenagers. They weren't armed. Weren't soldiers. Just folks. Ruth stepped forward. If Dutch Ashford wants to bring violence to our land, he'll answer to all of us. One by one, others joined her. 30 people, 40, standing together. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about me and Clem anymore. It was about whether decent folks would stand together against men like Dutch or scatter when threatened. Thomas looked at his people, then at me. Old tribal law says when a member of the nation is threatened, we all stand. Clementine's Caddo now. You protected her. That makes you kin. Tears stung my eyes. I ain't worth dying for. Maybe not, Ruth said. But what you represent is the idea that one person standing up can make a difference. That's worth defending. Pastor Wendell stepped beside me. I'll stay too. Mary Gunderson arrived with 3 other women from town. So will we. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. Somewhere out there, Dutch Ashford was coming with 30 men and enough hate to burn the world. And here we stood, maybe 50 people. No real weapons, just conviction. The marshal looked at Winters. "Sir, we need to evacuate these people." Winters stared at the crowd, at their faces. Then he did something I didn't expect. He unholstered his pistol, checked the chamber, looked at the marshal. "Call Dallas. Tell them we need every available agent. Then you and I are staying. These people have the law on their side. Time we prove that means something." In the distance, we heard engines, lots of them. They were coming. The trucks came at dusk, headlights cutting through the pine trees like searchlights, engines growling low and mean. They stopped at the boundary fence, lined up in a row, 12 vehicles, maybe 30 men. Dutch Ashford stepped out of the lead truck. Even from a distance, I could see the rage coming off him like heat shimmer. We stood on our side of the fence, maybe 50 of us now. Caddo families, mill workers who'd switched sides, Pastor Wendell, Mary Gunderson. Federal Prosecutor Winters and his marshal stood at the front, badges visible, Thomas Whitehorse beside them, and me. Dutch walked right up to the fence. His lawyers had dressed him nice, clean suit, polished shoes, trying to make him look respectable, but his eyes gave him away. Wild, desperate. "This is private business," Dutch called out. "Between me and my daughter. The rest of you got no stake in this." Winters stepped forward. "Mr. Ashford, you're out on bail pending serious charges. Coming here with an armed mob violates the conditions of your release. These are my employees, my friends. I got a right to speak with my daughter. Your daughter has requested no contact. That's her legal right. She's 16. She don't got rights. I got rights. I'm her father." "You're her trafficker," Winters said, voice cold as January. "And if you cross this fence, you'll be arrested for trespassing on federal land." Dutch's face went purple. He turned to the men behind him. "You all hear this? Federal government telling us we can't protect our own families? Telling us some Indian reservation got more authority than a Texas father?" Some of the men shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded, getting riled up. Then a new voice cut through the tension. "Dutch, that's enough." Everyone turned. A man stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the crowd. Older fella, late 60s, wearing work clothes. I recognized him. James Hutchins, Eller's father, owned the feed store in town. "Your daughter ain't property," James continued, walking forward, "and my son ain't buying her." "I made sure of that." Dutch's eyes narrowed. "Stay out of this, old man. Can't do that. See, I raised my boy wrong. Let him think women were things you could purchase. But I also raised him to have a conscience." James looked at the crowd. "My son Eller came to me 2 days ago, told me what Dutch proposed, showed me the contract. I was ashamed. Ashamed I'd raised a man who'd even consider such a thing." He pulled papers from his coat. "This is the original marriage contract, signed by Dutch Ashford and my son. I'm turning it over to the prosecutor as evidence." Winters took the papers, scanned them quickly. His expression hardened. "This corroborates everything. Thank you, Mr. Hutchins." Dutch lunged toward James, but his own men held him back. "You traitorous." "I ain't the traitor," James said quietly. "You are. You betrayed your daughter, your wife's memory. Every decent thing a father's supposed to be." Then Eller himself stepped forward from Dutch's group. The man looked wrecked, hadn't shaved, eyes red-rimmed. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking. "I'm sorry to Clementine, to all of you. I let greed and loneliness make me into something ugly." He looked at me. "Oz, you did what I should have done. Said no. Stood up. I'm testifying against Dutch. All of it. The contract, the threats, everything." The men behind Dutch started muttering, doubt spreading like cracks in ice. Then came the real shock. Sheriff Lon Barnes stepped out of his cruiser, walked past Dutch without looking at him, stood beside Winters. "Dutch," Lon said, "you're under arrest, again. Witness intimidation, conspiracy to commit violence, violation of bail conditions." He pulled out handcuffs. "Hands behind your back." Dutch stared at his brother-in-law in disbelief. "Lon, what the hell are you doing?" "My job. Should have done it days ago." Lon's voice was steady. "My sister, your wife, she didn't fall down those stairs, did she?" Silence crashed down like a wave. "I always wondered," Lon continued, "but I was scared. Scared of losing my job, my house, scared of what folks would think, so I looked the other way." His voice cracked. Helen was my sister, and I let her die unavenged because I was a coward. He stepped closer to Dutch. Not anymore. You're done. Dutch's face twisted. You spineless! But the fight had gone out of him. The men who'd come with him were backing away now, returning to their trucks. Without their support, Dutch was just an old man in an expensive suit, howling at the wind. Lon cuffed him, read him his rights, led him to the cruiser. As the door slammed shut, Dutch locked eyes with me one last time through the window. Not hatred anymore, just defeat. The trucks drove away. The crowd on our side started cheering, crying, hugging each other, but I couldn't celebrate yet. Something still felt wrong. Then I saw her, at the edge of the crowd, standing in the shadows of the council house. A woman, late 40s, wearing road-worn clothes, clutching a battered suitcase. She looked exactly like Clem. Older, but unmistakable. Ruth saw her too. Gasped. That can't be. The woman stepped into the light. Her voice shook, but held. My name is Margaret Ashford, and I'm very much alive. The crowd parted like water around a stone as Margaret Ashford walked forward, every step deliberate, carrying the weight of 8 years' absence. Ruth Longfeather recovered first. You're supposed to be dead. That's what Dutch wanted everyone to believe. Margaret's voice was stronger now. When I threatened to report his embezzlement, he pushed me down the stairs, broke my leg, cracked 3 ribs. When I woke in the hospital, he was there, told me if I came back he'd kill me properly. Then he'd kill Clementine. Said nobody would believe a deaf 8-year-old over him. She set down the suitcase, opened it. Inside, hospital records, photographs of injuries, letters written but never sent. I've been in Oklahoma, working under a false name, saving money, too terrified to come back. Tears filled her eyes. But when I heard what he tried to do to my daughter, selling her like livestock, I couldn't hide anymore. Winters stepped forward, examined the documents. Mrs. Ashford, these records show treatment for injuries consistent with your story. The dates match. Where's Clementine? Margaret's voice broke. Please, I need to see my daughter. Before anyone could answer, the council house door opened. Clem stood in the doorway. Mother and daughter locked eyes across 30 feet of dirt and darkness. 8 years collapsed into a single moment. Clem's mouth formed a word she'd probably never spoken aloud. Mama? Margaret nodded, sobbing. Yes, baby. Yes. Clem ran. Margaret caught her. They crumpled together onto the ground, holding each other like the world might try to tear them apart again. Everyone was crying. Even Thomas, who I'd never seen show much emotion, wiped his eyes. I stood there watching, feeling something break loose in my chest, something that had been locked tight since my wife died. This was what I'd been fighting for. Not just Clem's safety, but this moment, this reunion, this proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. Winters let them hold each other for a long while, finally approached gentle-like. Mrs. Ashford, you'll need to give a full statement, and we'll need to verify your identity. But if everything checks out, he looked at Clem, your daughter can go home with you. Margaret pulled back, looked at Clem's face. Is that what you want, sweetheart? Clem wrote on her ever-present notepad. Yes, but not right away. Why not? Ruth and the Barefoots took me in, gave me family. I want to stay here, finish school, learn sign language properly, visit you. Margaret read it, smiled through tears. You've grown so strong. I had help. Clem looked at me. Margaret stood, walked over, extended her hand. Mr. Mercer, I don't have words big enough to thank you. I took her hand. Don't need thanks. Just take care of her. I will. And, she hesitated. You're welcome in our lives. Anytime. She'll need her father. Those words hit me like a punch. Her father. Not by blood, by choice. 3 months later, the trial concluded. Dutch Ashford was convicted on multiple counts: human trafficking, fraud, conspiracy, and voluntary manslaughter in the death of Helen Ashford. sentenced to 15 years federal prison. The mill was sold to pay his debts. The workers formed a co-op, bought it for pennies on the dollar, made me foreman. Decent pay, good hours, treated folks right. Eller Hutchins testified against Dutch, then left town. Heard he moved to New Mexico, trying to become a better man. Hope he succeeds. Sheriff Lon Barnes resigned. New sheriff got elected. Woman named Patricia Morales. First female sheriff in county history. She don't take bribes. And Clem, she stayed with the Caddo Nation during the school year, visited Margaret on weekends and holidays, learned sign language, learned to read and write better than most college kids, started teaching other deaf children. Every other Saturday she visited me. We'd fish at the creek behind my cabin. She taught me sign language, slow going, but I was learning. I taught her to change truck oil, fix fence posts, all the practical things a person needs to know. Margaret remarried, good man this time, accountant from Tyler. Quiet fella who treated her like gold. And me, I kept working, kept living. But now there was purpose to it. Family dinners once a month at Margaret's place. Holidays at the Barefoot House on the reservation. A life that felt full instead of empty. 1 year to the day after I found her bleeding in the sawmill, Clem came to visit. Brought a package wrapped in brown paper. I opened it. A photograph in a simple wooden frame. Me, Clem, Margaret, Ruth, Thomas, the Barefoot family. All of us together at Christmas. She'd written on the back, "Family isn't who you're born to, it's who shows up." I set it on the mantle, right next to my wife's picture. That evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. Clem practiced her speech. She was learning to vocalize, slow and careful. "Thank you," she said aloud, the words thick but clear. "For everything." I signed back, still clumsy, but she understood. "You saved me too." She smiled, took my hand, squeezed it, and we sat there in the quiet, watching the sky turn orange and gold. Two broken people who'd found each other in the darkness and built something good. The wind carried the smell of pine and fresh-cut lumber. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Life, ordinary and precious, rolled on. And for the first time in 8 years, I felt something I'd thought was gone forever. Peace. That was 30 years ago now. Seems like yesterday sometimes. Other times feels like a whole different life. Clem's a grown woman. Got herself a teaching degree from Gallaudet University. That's the deaf college up in Washington. Married a good man, deaf like her. They got 2 kids. She brings them by every Christmas. The oldest one, a boy, she named him Oswin. After me. I cried when she told me that. Ain't ashamed to admit it. Dutch Ashford died in prison. Heart attack, 8 years into his sentence. The town don't speak his name anymore. Some things are better left buried. Folks ask me sometimes, "Oz, was it worth it? Losing your job, nearly getting killed, all that trouble?" And I tell them what my wife told me before she passed. Keep your heart soft, Oswin. That's the thing people forget. Keeping your heart soft ain't the same as being weak. Soft means you still feel things, still care when someone's bleeding and scared, still risk something when the world says to look away. I think about that night a lot. Finding Clem in the sawmill, blood on her hands, terror in her eyes. I could have walked away, could have called the sheriff and let someone else handle it. Would have been easier, but easy ain't the same as right. And here's what I learned. That girl saved me as much as I saved her. I'd been dead inside for 6 years. Just going through motions, no purpose, no reason to get up except habit. She gave me a reason. Reminded me that one person standing up, just one, can make all the difference. So if you've ever wondered whether you matter, whether your voice counts, whether standing up for someone will change anything, I'm here to tell you, it does. It always does. Dignity ain't something you're born with. It's something you choose. Every single day. And family. Family ain't blood. It's who shows up, who stays, who looks at you, broken, scared, different, and says, "You're worth fighting for." If this story touched you, I'd be grateful to know where you're listening from. We're all carrying something. Maybe you needed to hear that you're not alone, that doing right still matters, that it's never too late to stand up. Until next time, friend, may your heart stay soft, and may your dignity carry you through whatever storms come your way.